In this clip, we'll focus on detailing the pants. All right, so at the end of the last clip, we identified a couple of key details that we wanted to make sure got created inside of our textures. One being the patches, which I've done a little bit of work on, and I'll talk about that here in just a few minutes. But two being the stripes. Now, before we get started on those details, I do think it's worth mentioning to you that it's a good idea to preview your textures under different lighting circumstances. You can see here, if we jump over to our viewer settings and bring up the opacity for the environment, you can see something is going on in the background. Now I need to turn the blur down so you can see exactly what, but you can see here we have a high dynamic range image that's being used to create illumination. And it's sort of a daytime image with a countryside. Now, this image is producing a very specific type of lighting, but we can change this high dynamic range image to a different one from our shelf. So if we come over here under environments, you can see there are a number of these HDR images available to us. Really easy to swap this out. You can just simply grab one and drop it on the 3D viewport, just like so. And you can see the lighting for the textures has completely changed. There are a number of different HDRs you can experiment with here to try different lighting setups. Or you can even maybe come in and use one of these studio lighting setups. Now, if you want to get back to the original, it's going to be this panorama right here. And that'll get you back to the default lighting. I'm going to come back in here and increase the blur back to its default of 35, and I'll drop the opacity down. And let's jump back over here and look at the stripes. So we've learned a workflow for creating a base color and then layering additional colors on top of it using some masking techniques, both using different maps as well as hand-painted masks. Now we're going to create the stripes in the exact same fashion. I'm going to come in and drop in a fill layer first inside my stripes group, and we'll title that layer base. Now I'll jump back over to my properties panel with that layer selected and manage its contribution, disabling height and normal channel contribution. I'll come in here and I'll ramp up the roughness so it's not quite as shiny. I'm going to choose just a dark brown color here. And I think that should be pretty good to start off with. Awesome. So now we need to mask this color out. And I'm going to do that at the group level. So for the stripes group, let's come in and drop in a black mask, just like so. All right, great. So now we're ready to come in and begin thinking about painting our stripes. Now I'm going to come over here inside my properties panel with my mask selected, and I'm going to just take the hardness up to about 50–55%, like so. Now with that change made, I'll probably come back up here to the basic parameters and disable the pressure sensitivity for my size. Okay, great. Now back over here, let me just spin my environment light around so we have a nice clear view here. And obviously we're going to need to adjust the stroke size. So I'm going to shrink this down quite a lot, actually. I think I'm going to go with about a size of 1.5, just like so. And then I'm also going to use the lazy mouse. And we can come in here and we can adjust the distance as much as we need to. Okay. So in looking at these stripes, the placement and the spacing is going to be important. Again, I have the concept artwork pulled up on another monitor. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to look at the places where there are natural seams in the pair of pants. You can see one of those seams marked here on the side of the leg. And then there's another one right down here, traditionally where the inseam is. This is where the pattern of the stripes is going to be acceptable to break. So we can come in here and start to follow the natural curvature of that seam on the side in painting our first stripe. Now don't pay attention if the color isn't just perfect. We can always come back in and adjust that at a later point. But right now I'm just trying to get the technique of painting these stripes down. And we're going to paint in a few stripes here. Just like so. And I'm already looking at that color and I'm thinking that is pretty dark. I may have to lighten that brown up just a little bit. There's too much contrast. Okay, great. So we've got our 4 stripes painted. I'll go ahead and continue painting these stripes in between clips. It's the exact same process. We'll have to pay some special attention once we get here to the inside of the legs just to make sure patterns look okay as they meet that center line between the 2 shells. However, these stripes are, in addition to being too dark, they're also kind of plain looking. They're very flat. We created some really nice wear detail in our pants, and that wear detail isn't being applied to these stripes. Let's fix that. I'm going to come over here first, and let's just adjust the value here a little bit. I'm going to lighten those up and maybe desaturate them just a little. There we go. And then on top of that, we're going to drop in yet another fill layer. I'll manage the contribution, disabling height and normal channels. And we're going to rough that up. And let's go ahead and choose the exact same color as our previous fill. This one right here. And again, we're going to use the recent color box to kind of pick a nice color that's going to contrast well with this. Maybe disabling some of the saturation, increasing the value some. So we'll go with something that looks about like that. Okay, great. So we've got this wear layer here, and now we need to mask it because it's completely hiding our stripes. Again, we can do this simply by creating a black mask, just like so, and then selecting this mask and adding a fill. If you remember, we used the curvature map before. I'm going to use that exact same map again. Over here in my properties panel, I'll come down until we see the C's, and the curvatures, it's going to be the very second one for the clothing. So I'll select that here. And again, we may need to bounce over and just view the base color at first in order to be able to see what this is doing. So tapping the C key, you can see here, well, there's not enough contrast there to really make the 2 colors pop against one another. So I'm going to add in a levels effect, just like so. And then we can come in here and begin to tighten this levels effect up and create some contrast between these 2 colors. So you can see there is mostly the base, while this is mostly the wear color. So we're going to find kind of a happy medium between the 2. Okay, I think that's starting to look pretty good. Let's check that out with the material. Okay. Now I may need to come in and tweak these colors just a little bit. I may fine tune them again after I've finished painting the stripes. But basically we've got the look of the stripes almost nailed down with the exception of that little bit of fine tuning. Now let's go ahead and talk a little bit about patches. And you can see I've done a little bit of work on the patches in between the last clip and this one. In fact, I've painted a mask here that has isolated that area. And you can see there's a blue color applied. This is the mask where I've painted that. Now let's go ahead and look inside this group and you'll see there's actually 3 different fill layers. One for stitches, one for patch 2, and one for patch 1. So this is how we're again beginning to nest this detail. We're inside the pants, we're inside the patches, and now we're going to start creating individual detail for each of the 2 patches and the stitches. So let's come in and create a few layer groups. Again, we'll call this one patch 1. And I'll collapse that. We'll come over here, create another one, pull that layer in and call it patch 2. And let's come in and create another one here, pull this fill layer in and call this one stitches. All right, great. So if we look here, we have basically created all of the folders we need to create this nested detail. Now, I have hand painted a single mask here, and ultimately we need to begin masking each of these groups out to just show the stitches, patch 2, and patch 1. Let me show you how you can do this. I'm going to come down here to patch 1, and I'm going to quickly drop in a black mask. And we'll just hide these other 2 right here, just for the time being. Now again, we can shift click on this mask and hide it, and you can see here there's that orange fill. But I want to start with the mask that I painted for this entire area, this mask right here. And I'm simply going to right click on this mask. I'm going to choose copy mask. I'm going to come down and select the mask for patch 1, right click there, and choose paste into mask. Well, look what happened. All of a sudden, we now have the exact same mask on patch 1. So that'll give me a head start as I'm beginning to paint my mask for this one. I've already isolated just this area, so now I can come in here with my brush and I can begin to choose, okay, is this patch 1 in the front? I think it probably is. So now let's paint in some black by tapping the X key and mask out the remaining pieces of what is masked inside this mask we initially painted. We'll do it just like so. Now again, this is a hand-painted mask, so it'll take a little bit of time for me to get this to where it's acceptable to me. So I will probably end up painting this mask in between this clip and the next clip. But I wanted to give you a challenge. So when it comes to the detail of the patches here, I want you to treat each patch and the stitches just like we have with the base color for the pants and the stripes. Create a base color for the patch, then create a detail color for the patch. Manage the roughness for each one, and think about the material that it's made out of when you're doing this. Is it leather? Is it cotton? Is it satin? What are the properties of that material? Go ahead and create the unique look for each of these 3 areas, as well as finishing the stripes, and I'll meet you in the next clip and we'll begin working on our character's shirt.